Fish Department. He had several Pioneer licenses. He's an older gentleman and he still enjoyed trapping, and he wanted to know why there wasn't a Pioneer license for trapping. He researched it with the department and they said there wasn't statute to do it. They told him to reach out to his legislator. So here I am. I thought it was a fairly easy fix, like most things that are fairly easy, but what this bill essentially does is allows for a Pioneer trapping license that lowers the fee from the normal fee is $43. This lowers it for the people that qualify to $20. How we decided there were several different ages. There's not really parity in the current statute. There's a provision in 23-1-705 for anybody over 75. There's a provision for people 70 years old. This one is drafted at 65 years old. I don't think I'm going to split hairs about the age unless you guys want to do something with parity. But 65 years of age that have resided in Wyoming for 30 years. And that's the bill. It's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. I'll stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Representative Clausen. Committee, any questions for the good representative? Yes, Chairman Plittner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Representative Clausen, do you have any indication what kind of numbers we might be looking at here in terms of how many trappers would qualify?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, I do not. When I asked this question, it came up not very many. So, and if you look at the fiscal note, it has almost it says no fiscal or personal impact. So this is typically is a young man's sport, but there are several gentlemen as my constituent who are a little older that would still like to participate. But no, I didn't research those numbers exactly. But every time I asked the question, it came up not very many. So. Not a good answer, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Newsom, would you like to take over?
Thank you, Representative Hunt. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. So you mentioned that there are other Pioneer type licenses. Do you know what those age limits are? And would it be comparable?
Sort of. Yes, I know what they are.
Representative Clausen.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chairman. Representative Sweeney, yes, I know what they are, and they are not parity. They are in 23-1-705, a little I, and one is a $2 fee for residents for deer, antelope, wild turkey, elk licenses. In section 2, it is a fee that is for people 70 years of age. And it is, let's see, they have to be in Wyoming 50 years and shall not be more than 65% or less than 60% of the resident specified fee. Those are different sort of licenses because they're for typically one animal. This is for the trapper's license, which is for more than one animal, or fur bearer's license, I guess. Or resident trapping license, fur bearing, which is like a season-long license. So there's not really parity there. So what I ended up doing was picking the $20 rate. It was somewhere in the 50-60%. It wasn't the $2 for the other one. I was trying to find a parity, and that number's, I threw things against the wall and that seemed to stick, if you want to know my scientific method.
Follow up. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chairman. So what is a normal, I'm not a trapper. So what's a normal license cost for the season?
Madam Chairman.
Representative Clausen.
So the normal license under 23-2-301 for a resident trapping fur bearer license is $43. And what this bill would do was lower that to $20. There is a provision for a youth resident trapping license that is $6. Non-resident trapping license fur bearing is $247. I thought 6 was probably a smidge low. Going off the 60% thing, $20 just seemed to stick.
Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Representative Clausen, so just because I don't want to go through and look that up, your rate, you're taking it from $43 to $20 once a year.
Correct, for people that
Thank you,
that
Madam
meet those
Chairman.
parameters.
Chairman.
Representative Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Clausen, was there any consideration given or questions about experience for any of these pioneer trappers? In other words, do they have to give any background as to their training or their experience in trapping to get this pioneer license?
Madam Chairman.
Representative Clausen.
Madam Chairman, Representative Winters, so experience wasn't taken in, but there was a residence requirement, which I believe was it's 30 years in Wyoming. And I ran this through the department, and that's kind of the number that they came up with.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. More or less of a question and more of a statement. My grandfather, who wasn't originally from Wyoming, grew up in the Red River Valley area, and he was a dryland farmer, and he trapped, and it was a very large part of their income stream. While my mom was a child, and so in his retirement years, he said, "You know what?" He goes, "I'm not going to run a trap line like I used to run," but he runs a trap line, and he did up until his 85th birthday. At that time, he decided to fall through the ice and decided it was too close of a call and didn't do it anymore. But I think there's something to be said in the realm of the experience. Majority of the time, if they're 65 years or older, they're not going to pick up trapping for the first time because it is a hard job. Second of all, I think it's awesome if we can keep the older generation in the field as long as possible. That's prolonging life right there. Give them something to look forward to. My grandpa going out and checking a trap line every morning kept him young. So I think it's a great idea, and I think it's an awesome opportunity to give the next generation, or the last generation, if you want to call it that, the opportunity to stay in the field as long as possible. So I definitely am for this, and I think we can make this work.
Any other comments from the committee? Any comments from, are there any departments here? Department heads online? Are there any comments from the online?
Madam Chairman, yes, there are. The Game and Fish is here and another person. I'll bring them both over.
Should I go back?
They should be coming visible.
I guess we'll move at this point to the other legislators in the room.
Oh.
We can certainly, they can wait.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, can I testify right now? This is my first time, so is it the right time to do it?
We're going to have one of our legislators testify, and then you will be next.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I won't take long. No, I just wanted to, because I'm a co-sponsor on the bill, I wanted to come down and support my fellow legislator in this. In fact, also, it hasn't even been mentioned, and Representative Haroldson did mention this slightly. We are trying desperately right now to get young people interested in the outdoors and get them interested in our resources that we have in this state. And I signed on to this legislation as a co-sponsor because I feel like this is a wonderful opportunity for granddads and maybe grandmas to take their grandchildren or their sons or daughters out into the woods and help them appreciate what they're doing. And if we can reduce this fee a little bit for somebody that has spent 30 years fighting winters in Wyoming, I think that's a pretty neat thing. And it also encourages them to get their young people out. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to come down and say I support this legislation. I know the folks in my district support it. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to get more young people involved in wonderful opportunities that we have in this state. And so I'm all for that. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it, Madam Chairman.
Any questions for Representative Nyman? No, then we'll move on to Game and Fish. If you would introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm Greg Phipps with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, Fiscal Division Chief. And looking at this bill, there's a slight revenue decrease to the department, but not what I would call necessarily significant. As far as impacts to Game and Fish programs, this would be a new license product for us. That's also a minimal impact. And when we look at the numbers to quantify the fiscal impact, there would be for license year 2020, there were a total of 41 trappers that were age 65 or older. And of those 41, there were 29 resident trappers with 30 or more years of residency that would qualify for a lifetime trapping pioneer license. 29 of those trappers would have generated $1,305 in revenue per year. If all of the 29 trappers that would qualify under this bill, there would be an overall $725 decrease in annual revenue to the department the first year. And then, of course, they would have no future trapping license revenue in the future. Another point I'd like to communicate is in Wyoming statute 23-1-705 Bowlegs D. That's where there's the statutory language for our other resident lifetime licenses, such as the honorably discharged veteran lifetime bird, small game and fishing licenses, which has an age limit there as well. And then this bill has it proposed under 23-1-705 Bowlegs E. So this would create a different license requirements for lifetime trapping licenses as compared to our other lifetime licenses. And barring any questions.
Any questions for the Game and Fish? Chairman Flintner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Phipps, so in reference to your last statement where this would be placed under subparagraph E, is there a better place for it?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Wyoming statute 23-1-705 Bowlegs Delta, D, would be in line with our other lifetime licenses.
Did you have a follow-up? Any other questions for Mr. Phipps? Thank you so much. Is there any other testimony? I guess we're to public at this point. Ms. Johnson.
Can I speak now? I'm Ms. Anderson.
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay. My name is Madhu Anderson and I live in Rock Springs, Wyoming. I have lived here more than 10 years and I am opposed to this bill HB 0112. There are a couple of reasons I want to address, as in my opinion, like if folks who are older, like 65 or older, it would be hard for them, or maybe it would be difficult for them to go and check on traps regularly. So the animals might suffer in the traps longer or might not be even might go unchecked for a while. And I think it does decrease in revenue, and we do need money for our game and fish departments and the other wildlife agencies in our state. And sometimes I feel that when something is cheaper and it's free, it could be abused in different ways. So I do oppose this bill, and please, I politely urge you not to pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Anderson? Can you repeat your name, and are you with any organization or just testifying personally?
I'm testifying personally. I'm a resident of Rock Springs for a long time, and I believe that this wildlife and this land, I have some responsibility to speak up if I feel I'm not comfortable with this bill passing. And my name is Madhu Anderson.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Anderson? Thank you, Ms. Anderson, for providing your testimony. Now we'll move to Ms. Johnson.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Jessie Johnson with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and I'll just keep this brief. I echo a lot of the same sentiments as the representative who spoke on this earlier. We are in support of this bill. Many of our membership are trappers, and we're just happy to see a little nod go their way. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Anderson or Ms. Johnson? Sorry. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else from the public would like to testify? Okay, moving back to the committee. What's your feeling on this legislation?
Move the bill.
Move the bill, moved by Hunt, Representative Hunt, second by Jennings. Any discussion? Representative Jennings.
Madam Chairman, I'm just a little bit disappointed we didn't see somebody from the muskrat lobby. I would have thought they'd have been against this with experienced trappers. But I think it's a great bill.
Thank you. Anyone else? Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just briefly, well, I actually would do one better on Representative Harrelson, all due respect, but had a former family member, he's passed away now, but was my uncle's brother who was a trapper who passed away a month shy of his 99th birthday and was out trapping until a few months before he passed away. But at the age of 98 years old, he was out running his trap lines every day in the fall. And so anyway, just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hunt. Representative Flintner.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And I just want to talk to the committee too about what Mr. Phipps had said about possibly moving this and putting it, better aligning it. I think that's what he had implied, that we should move it from, rather than, as I'm looking at 231705, this would be V. And if Mr. Phipps is still online, if he could come back, I believe, didn't he say it would be better in B?
Is
He
Mr.
is a
Phipps
boy?
still online?
Madam Chairman, I'm bringing him back.
Thank you. Thank you for returning to us, Mr. Phipps. Chairman Flintner has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Mr. Phipps, I would like to move this based on what you had told us in terms of placing it better in statute. And if I understood you correctly, this would be subparagraph V as in Victor, and your preference would be to put it back in subparagraph B as in boy. Is that correct?
Madam Chairman, Representative Flitner, that's the recommendation is to move it from Bowlegs Echo E and place under Bowlegs Delta as in D.
So as I understand it, we want to move it from D as in Delta from E to D. Is that correct?
Madam Chairman, that's correct.
Yeah. So is that an amendment, Chairman Flintner?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I would so move that amendment, but you're going to have to speak it because I don't know how to
I'm-
speak it.
Moved by Flintner, seconded by Jennings, to change where this would appear in statute from 23-1-705 E to 23-1 EV to 23-1-705 D, however, LSO would make that. I think it would just move to D. I don't have. We will make that conceptual amendment work. Any discussion on the amendment of moving where this would sit in statute? Okay, we're voting on amendment from Chairman Flintner. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that amendment passes, and we'll get that correct language to you. Any other amendments or discussion on the bill? Question being called. All, whoops, oh, John. Representative Winter, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'm getting pretty old and I have a Pioneer hunting license and it's great. I think it's a wonderful thing that the legislature is able to do, and now especially for this trapping thing. So I would certainly recommend that we vote aye on this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Sensing you're ready for the question. All those in favor? Oh, roll call vote on House Bill 112.
Representative Banks. Representative Haroldson.
Aye.
Representative Hunt. Representative Jennings. Representative Knapp. Madam Chairman Newsom.
Aye.
Representative Sweeney. Representative Winter.
Aye.
Madam Chairman Flintner.
Aye.
The bill passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Clausen.
9 to 9.
Moving on to our next bill, House Bill 122. Representative Western. Not yet. Please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairwoman. So I'm going to try to follow the two golden rules when presenting legislation. That is to identify the problem and how this bill specifically solves that problem. And so the context of the issue is public access for hunters and anglers. In Wyoming and across the American West, hunters are heavily reliant on public land and public waters to recreate and to hunt. And in Wyoming, there's about 3 million acres of public land, whether it be Forest Service, BLM, or state parcels that are landlocked, that are inaccessible. And so I think the stat that really tells the importance of this issue is this one. 95% of the hunting public rely wholly or in part on public land for successful harvests. So that kind of frames the significance of it. And if you were to go up and ask the average hunter in Main Street, Wyoming, what are the major hunting issues that are important to you, almost without exception, they're going to talk about public land access and a lack thereof. And so it's a pretty significant issue that certainly amongst the hunting public. So how does this bill help solve that issue? It's pretty simple and straightforward, really. It just takes the price of a conservation stamp, raises it by $9. That increase goes into a dedicated fund that Game and Fish must use to fund the current access programs that we already have on the books, which is Access Yes. So that's really the whole kit and caboodle right there. So I stand for any questions.
Question, Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, and Representative Western. So on page 3, starting with line 4, we're going to take 15% of this and we're going to address signage. Well, backing up to 3, transportation system, including signage, wildlife corridors, wildlife crossings, and game fences. Could I get you to delve into that just a little bit more and give us, you know, what that looks like? Because 15% off of this doesn't look like a whole lot of money. And yet, looks to me like we're doing quite a bit of stuff there.
Not paying attention. Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Yeah, Representative Jennings. So this is, I would say, another tool in the toolbox that Game and Fish can use to negotiate with some of these landowners. Because some of them may say, it's not so much maybe the dollar figure, but you know what, if we can work on some of this signage or fencing or some of these other kind of things that some landowners are concerned about, it's another tool in the toolbox for Game and Fish. And it coincides with helping with some of our wildlife populations that can benefit from these kind of management practices.
Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One question for you that I do have in the current program, the Access Yes program, have we unlocked any landlocked public, or is it just the I mean, I guess it unlocks some, but a majority of this would just be a walk-in type program, correct? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, because like in my neck of the woods, we have large amounts of landlocked BLM and state, but getting those accesses, it could be 100 feet, it could be a mile to unlock has proven ineffective, or we haven't found that capability. And I just want to know if there has been any research gone into the fact that if we were to do this and put this burden upon our sportsmen, if we would really see large portions of landlock opened up with this financing. And that's, I guess, would be my question.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Representative Haroldson, I think that's a perfectly fair question. And I did a good amount of consultation with Game and Fish and the chief game warden there, who was the administrator for Access Yes, in coordinating that and working with landowners. And in my conversations, he told me that there's quite a few specific instances across the state where landowners are at the table, it's part of the conversation, but the fact that Access Yes pays, how shall I put this charitably, very, very small amounts of money for access. Some of these landowners were kind of saying, well, I'm not really feel like I'm being fairly compensated for any type of access agreement, whether it be, 200 yards to a chunk of BLM or 2 miles. And so the tools we have there between the specific things in Access Yes, which is walk-in areas and hunter management areas, the tools themselves are designed very well. It allows the landowner to state the terms that they're comfortable with and the price that they want. It allows Game and Fish to say, okay, based off what you're comfortable with, we'll pay you X. Really, the whole missing link in this entire equation is adequate funding for it. I will certainly commend the chief game warden for doing a pretty dang good job for getting the access we do get for a shoestring budget that they operate on for that program. But I mean, they've conveyed, and I've talked to landowners on both ends of the spectrum, that there's a lot more opportunities that would come online if they had more financial wherewithal to negotiate these types of agreements between Access Yes and our CBM walk-in areas and hunter management areas.
Representative Haroldson, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So then a second question is, let's dig into the history real quick. What's the history of the conservation stamp and what was stated when the conservation stamp went into effect many, many years ago?
Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Representative Haroldson. So the history of the stamp was to monetize a mechanism for conservation and to help generate revenue from some of these hunters to help pay for some of the things that Game and Fish does. I mean, obviously, the main thing that funds Game and Fish is the sale of hunting licenses to residents and non-residents. But the conservation stamp was created as a component of not just funding the agency, but also carrying out the really important services that it does of obviously enforcement, wildlife management, et cetera.
Any other comments, questions from Chairman Flintner?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Western, on page 3, Romanet 2, where it says, it speaks to the 15% that Representative Jennings referenced, and it says that of that 15%, it would go to wildlife conservation efforts related to the transportation system. What is that?
Representative Western.
Madam Vice Chair, Chairwoman Flitner. So that refers to, in part to some of the issues that have been going on with some of our wildlife populations, specifically mule deer. And in some of these instances, there's an issue with fencing and with some of these landowners that are willing to work with, whether it's game-friendly fencing or some of these other things. These are the type of funds that can go into those kind of agreements, and as well as helping fund some of the things that help our wildlife populations, like I said, mule deer, and specifically how the fragmentation of some of these wildlife corridors has created a challenge where wildlife gets hit quite a bit. I know we just discussed ad nauseum a roadkill bill, but not to piggyback on that. There's a lot of mule deer, about 4,500 or so, who die every year in vehicle collisions, and so this is another tool in the toolbox in helping address that problem.
Have a follow-up? I'm going to address that just briefly, is that the wildlife crossings are the purview of WYDOT, of the Wyoming Department of Transportation, and that's why transportation is referenced here. Any other questions? Representative Jennings.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Western. I'm sorry. So I'd like to divert it. I don't feel like I've gotten very far on the 15% part here, but I'd like to divert it to a secondary question. So in researching this bill, when you do access, yes, there's a component there of that's not compulsory. You can donate. And so when you were researching and doing this bill, because this is compulsory, when you buy your hunting license, we're going to take that conservation stamp up. You happen to know the percentage, 40 to 50? It's not 50%, but it's up pretty good. We're compulsory making, in the research with the Fish and Game or any of those people that you talked with, was there any discussion about, look, this is kind of we're bringing the conservation cost up to almost the identical to, say, a meat hunter that wants to go shoot one doe deer, and now they're going to have $43 involved. So was there talk about making this compulsory and what that might do, or was there talk about not making it compulsory and making it a suggestion?
Representative Western.
Madam Vice Chair, Representative Jennings. So there's already a mechanism for voluntary contributions. And so I certainly understand it's $9 is, to some people, that's real money. And I appreciate that. I think at the end of the day, a lot of the hunters I've talked to, the average Joe hunters and folks like that, they're willing to pay it as long as they know it's going to something that they benefit from, that they're getting bang for the buck. And given how important access is and public access is to hunters, and how it's one of their top priority items, this is a situation where that money is actually going towards generating a result and not just going to fund some more jobs at an agency, but this is actually going on the ground, having impact for the benefit of those who are actually paying the fee. It's access for hunters, paid for by hunters and anglers and some of those other sportsmen.
Other questions, follow up?
Thank you, Madam Lady, Chair Lady. Chairman, Madam Chairman. So, and I'm totally for the the access. I think that's a really good, noble idea that we try and get access to more and more of our state and federal lands. But we are in a state that holds 47% of our state is public lands already. What's the feedback that you've gotten on the access programs so far? I mean, how much land are we opening up in comparison to how much is already open?
Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Representative Jennings. Over time, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of acres of land that is already state land, BLM, and Forest Service. I think it's important to note that the programs that we have now, Access Yes, which is walk-in areas and HMAs, are not compulsory for landowners. It's totally optional. The landowner gets to name the price that they're comfortable with and the terms they're comfortable with. So let's say a landowner only wants to allow cow hunters and only for the second half of the season. And they have to park at this point in the county road or whatever it is. I think that this bill really, and the programs we have on the books, really strike the good balance between trying to generate access for our hunters, but also respecting private property rights. Obviously, you're a big time private property rights guy, and as I think we all are on this committee. So I think this kind of strikes that balance of really meeting the landowner's demands of saying, hey, my price is here. If you can't come up to it, kind of tough luck. So I think this does a good job of striking that balance. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Follow up. Any other questions from the committee? Representative Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to address Representative Jennings' concerns. My experience has been that with non-resident hunters anyway, that they're perfectly willing and able to pay these fees for these conservation stamps. They understand the need for access, and the ones I'm more affiliated with is they go with an outfitter, and private land isn't really a concern for them, but they're certainly willing to pay it. And I think the resident hunters are willing to pay it as well in order to get better access. And it certainly helps, excuse me, it really helps the resident landowner to give him an incentive to provide his lands available for the hunter. So I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Chairman Flintner.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And Representative Western on subparagraph I, when it speaks to the commission shall notify the appropriate boards of county commissioners in writing before purchasing any access easements or entering into an agreement under this paragraph shall hold public hearings at the request of any board of county commissioners. Speak to me why that language is in there. Why would it be necessary for public meetings if we were talking about trying to get to access through private property?
Representative Western.
Madam Chairwoman, I think partly is also the spirit of it is saying, hey, a state agency is negotiating something for the benefit of the public in that county. And I generally believe it's not a bad idea to at least notify those commissioners that say, hey, this is something that we're working on here. Should you have any objection or concerns, we can have a hearing. I think there might be a statutory reference for these kind of things that they have to be notified to the Board of Commissioners, but I'd have to double check on the veracity of that. Yeah, I think Game and Fish is online and they might be able to weigh in on that, but.
Any other comments, questions for Representative Western? Okay, moving on, any other legislators in the room? Representative Nyman, Representative Clausen, you want to comment on this? No? Okay. Then, Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, Chairwoman,
Chairman.
Chairperson,
Chairman or Chairwoman?
So, Representative Western, on page 2, starting in line 16 is an interesting word, difficult to access or inaccessible. Inaccessible, I understand. it's landlocked, but difficult to access. Why is that part in there? I mean, theoretically, I could think, well, that's 3 miles, that's difficult, or 30 feet if I'm having trouble walking. As the older I get, the more I have. So could you explain to me why that part is in there? And what is the defining term to that if we're going to put that in statute?
Representative Western.
Madam Vice Chair, Representative Jennings, I'll illustrate why it's in there with a personal story. I won't reveal the specific location of it, but there have been multiple instances in my hunting career where, say I'm on a chunk of public land and not too far away, mile, half mile, there's another really good chunk of public and I know that there's high quality game, seen them through my spotting scope. I want to get over there. But obviously I can't walk in a straight line right across there. I can still access it by staying on public, but I have to hike all the way around just to get to where I want to go. One specific instance, I had to hike 10 extra miles completely out of the way, down a canyon, back up the canyon, through some timber just to get to where I wanted to go because it was difficult to access. So it's not technically landlocked or isolated by private or fee land, but it can be very difficult to access. So that's why that terminology is in the bill.
Follow up.
Thank you, Chairman. So who determines difficult?
Representative Western.
Madam Vice Chair, Representative Jennings, that's something that's done in consultation with Game and Fish and the landowners. Also, when Game and Fish goes to identify access, yes, they also take feedback from the local residents and those hunters and saying, hey, there's this great chunk of BLM, what have you, that we'd love to get to. Maybe solicit some of the landowners around and see if they'd be willing to have those kind of agreements. And some of them are ones, tracts of public that are specifically brought forward by local sportsmen that again, are not isolated by fee, but are very difficult to access otherwise. Sometimes you have to hike 10 plus miles, which may not numerically seem a lot, but when you're gaining and losing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 feet in those 10 miles, it's a haul, especially if you got a full pack on. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Flintner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And that brings up a question for me, Representative Western. Why all this new language? If this is simply a tool to increase the amount of money paid to a conservation stamp to bolster the Access Yes program, why do we need all this new language? And one thing I would note is, we do have Game and Fish has put together a task force. And I know that this is an issue that they plan to address and take up in this next year. So I'm a little reticent to add all this new language. If we just simply, I don't have a problem with bumping up that fee, but I am a little concerned about all this new language like difficult to access. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Representative Western.
Madam Vice Chair. It simply just delineates specifically where and how that money must be spent. And that bifurcation between say 85% has to go specifically towards these agreements with landowners and the tools that we do have available, or easements as well, should a landowner choose, be willing to engage in that option, and also leaving that 15% for some of those transportation and road related issues, wildlife and outdoor recreation. So that's why the language is in there to kind of be very specific in the language that we have and where that $9 fee goes as compared to some of the other language that we do have in statute. Thank you.
Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Going back briefly to on page 2, lines 15, 16, where does a beloved checkerboard of land ownership, where do those four corner intersections come into play? How is that defined? Is that so when you come to that intersecting 4 points, is that defined as accessible or inaccessible? And would this, if it is inaccessible, would this address that?
Representative Western.
Madam Vice Chairwoman, Representative Hunt. So what you're kind of talking about is that those 4 corners. And it is not legal per an opinion that was issued by the former Attorney General in the mid-aughts. Corner hopping is not legal. It is specifically outlawed. And so while it may appear that you could literally, walk from one corner to another without stepping on private, it has been deemed by the Attorney General that that is illegal. So there's a lot of land that would otherwise be accessible if we could do corner hopping, but it is illegal. So and you mentioned the checkerboard. This is absolutely a situation where these kind of funds, this kind of legislation absolutely can help move the needle on unlocking that for some of those sportsmen, whether it be with some of the grazing associations or some of the individual ranchers, and they can be fairly compensated for it.
Do you have a follow-up? Anyone else? Okay, I think we'll move on to, Pat. Chris.
Madam Chair, thank you. Representative Western, just a little bit about Access Yes. What kind of allocation does that receive per year? Do you know for its funding as a program?
So the majority of Access Yes relies on purely voluntary donations.
Okay.
So if I go online right now and apply for, I guess you can apply for ELK right now, you're eligible to. When you go through the whole process and earn your sportsman ID number, et cetera, one of the little boxes on the corner is, I think there's 2 or 3 boxes now. One of those is, do you want to donate to Access Yes? Which is great because it's voluntary. It's certainly not compulsory, but it's just underfunded. And if you look at some of the states that do have really good programs that strike the balance between public access, private land ownership, like Montana with their block management system, it's funded very, very well. And as a result, there's pretty dang good public access. And not just in Western Montana, where it has huge tracts of Forest Service where it's all contiguous, but also Eastern Montana, which has a lot of that chunked up state land and BLM and some of those other types of public lands. So it's a lot of Access Yes requires voluntary funding, and this is just kind of puts more financial muscle for the program.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think we'll move to online to Game and Fish. I believe maybe Chief King is there.
Madam Chairman, yes, Game and Fish is coming over, and there is also Liz Rose, who is online. I'm not sure if she wants to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chairman.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself and
Sorry, good afternoon, Madam Chairman. I'm Brian Nesvik, Director of Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So I've got, I hope, some answers to some of the questions that have come up. Representative Western's done a good job of answering several of them, but I'll provide a little bit more detail, I hope, and hopefully be able to clarify a few things. So first of all, just looking at what the gross revenue would be with this increase in the conservation stamp fee. We currently sell about 185,000 stamps each year. And so this would result in about a $1.7 million increase for the 2 programs that have been identified in the bill, the Access program, and then also funding for wildlife crossings and similar type conservation activities. And that equates to about a $240,000 a year potential revenue, as we've estimated that based on our prediction that this would raise about $1.7 million a year based on our current license sales. So, this certainly addresses, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things that Representative Western said, but it does, I will reiterate that it does provide funding to something that we hear about routinely from our sportsmen, and that is access to lands that are either difficult or inaccessible without obtaining permission from a landowner. So we do have a couple of places now in the state, or several. I'll give you a couple examples of where we have negotiated long-term leases or long-term easements to access public lands. One that's close here to Cheyenne is over, it's called the Pitcher Brokaw access area. It's just south of Arlington. And that 3 to 4 mile stretch of road through private fee title lands to landowners accesses a significant portion of the northern end of the Snowy Range in the U.S. Forest Service lands that are administered by those folks. This is an example too of what Representative Western talked about, where these lands are not completely inaccessible. You could come from the south in this particular example and access them. This provides much easier access from the north side of that particular forest. Other areas recently, there was an acquisition of through multiple partners. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation led the charge on this, but an access agreement that actually only crossed like a mile of private land that accessed about 30,000 acres of public land. The process, if the way that we would interpret and apply this bill if it were to pass, is any access agreements, as Representative Western pointed out, would be negotiated with landowners. And when I say landowners plural, I mean all of the landowners that would potentially have an interest. Certainly the landowner whose fee title lands we were crossing, but also other potentially affected landowners would certainly be consulted, as well as the public. Any of these agreements that the commission currently enters into go through a full public process. They're heard in public at a commission meeting, and the public has an opportunity to comment. Regarding the specific requirement to talk with county commissioners, the board of county commissioners, I don't view that as overly burdensome for the department, but certainly our priority would be with consulting and gaining consensus with the landowners that were directly affected. Specifically, who would determine, I heard the question from Representative Jennings, who would determine difficult to access? And I think what the statute does, and the way it's written is it provides direction to the commission. And so that would rest in the commission's hand to say, yeah, this appears to be one of those difficult to access areas. They would also have the option to put that into regulation. However, I think that, they would probably initially attempt to implement this bill without having to have an additional regulation to define that. As far as corner crossing that Representative Hunt brought up, an example of where this could be applied there is in an area where there was a corner where two pieces of public meet at the same place that two pieces of private fee title meet. There could be an access agreement negotiated where sportsmen would be able to cross that corner, and there would be a payment to that landowner to allow that access. That would be one example. Currently, the Access Yes program has there's about $1 million a year that's expended through that program for walk-in hunt areas, as well as hunter management areas. These are two different types of programs that have been in place for over 20 years now. They've both been successful, but as Representative Western pointed out, often, it's not a lot of money. It doesn't compete with some of the other opportunities that landowners might be able to see from other private or commercial interests. And so, again, this bill would provide additional funding to deal specifically with longer term easements, longer term leases, and would be separate, the way I interpret the bill, from the current Access Yes program. That is funded currently. 25% of the current conservation stamp fee goes to the Access Yes program. This bill does not change that. The other revenue for the Access Yes program is from private donations. A couple other things I wanted to bring up quickly. So this just came, and I haven't had an opportunity. It came up last night, actually. I haven't had an opportunity to run this by Representative Western, but one potential amendment I would offer for the committee's consideration, if it was favorable to Representative Western, would be to add some component of fish passage into what these funds could be used for on page 3, and I'll describe that here just a little bit. So the equivalent to migration corridors for big game for fish is what we call fish passage. Oftentimes there's places around the state where fish do migrate up and down streams and rivers. And we currently look for opportunities where we have willing landowners or willing constituents to open up those blockages to allow fish to migrate. Since fishermen are required, any fisherman that buys an annual license are required to buy a conservation stamp, there's an opportunity here to also include a fisheries component to how this money could be spent specific to that's dedicated to the transportation system. The other thing I would say about, and I'll provide if you're interested, if the committee wants to even consider it, and if Representative Western thinks that's a good idea, I've got a specific place to add that language, but I'll wait until I hear from the committee on that. The other thing I would say is that specific to crossings, I really applaud Representative Western for looking for unique ways to continue to help fund some of those. They're extremely expensive. It's become a high priority for our commission and our department, and certainly the public as well. There's a public safety component as well as a wildlife health component to preventing big game animals from being hit on the highways. We recently participated and partnered on a project south of Big Piney, and the cost of putting in several underpasses to allow big game to move back and forth across that highway without getting hit is now at about $21 million. And that project is funded. There's a large component of that is federal, but it is funded, and it's going to, ground will be broke here in the near future. The project we're working on now is a stretch of I-25 that's between Case and Buffalo, where the second highest place in the state where we have wildlife collisions. That's a simple fencing project to fence off the interstate to force deer and antelope, primarily some elk, to use existing cattle underpasses to cross the highway. That project is in there around $4.5 million. So these things aren't cheap. There have been recent efforts by the legislature to help with that, with the conservation license plate and some other efforts by the legislature. But I think this would provide, certainly from the department's perspective, another opportunity for funding to go in that direction. That does have, from our gauge anyway, some high public support. The only other thing I would say that if the commission, if this were to pass, the way that the commission and the department would interpret this is that these funds would be allocated annually, but that they wouldn't necessarily have to be expended annually. And the reason I bring that up is because it's the amount of money that would be provided specifically for access agreements would be around $1.2 million a year. Oftentimes these projects require quite a bit of vetting if they're higher dollar projects. And if we were required to absolutely spend every dollar of that every year in statute, that would be problematic for the department. The way I interpret this, and I guess I'm interested in the intent, is that we would certainly set those funds aside on an annual basis, but they wouldn't necessarily have to be expended in that year that we generated the revenue. They could be expended in future years, and the account would just always be an earmarked account that we could use for these specific projects that are identified in the bill. With that, I would certainly stand for any questions and ask the committee if there's any other gaps I can fill in.
Are there any questions from the committee for Director Nesbitt?
Madam Chairman.
Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Director, appreciate your coming and testifying today. So if I heard you correctly there, it will be problematic to have to spend these funds annually. Could you go into that a little bit further? I mean, I understand that you're wanting to build up some money and have a pool of money to spend on some projects that you'd like to do. But why would it be problematic for a conservation or, in tandem with the access? Why would it be a problem if we wanted you to spend this money annually?
Madam Chairman, Representative Jennings. So the reason I bring that up is I do believe we can develop the need and we can develop projects. There are plenty of opportunities around the state to do that. However, and I'm thinking even in just the first year, to go through a complete public process, identify places where we have willing landowners, and actually put that money on the ground within the first year, I think would be difficult. I think it would constrain us, and I think it could put us in a spot where we were rushed to get to a point where we could meet the statute and may not fully vet the value of different projects. I don't want any members of the committee to take my comments as meaning I don't think we would want to allocate this much money to those programs. But if the intent of the legislation is that we do it every single year, the full amount that is raised by this program, by this new fee on this stamp, that's where I'm trying to say it would be problematic to spend every single dollar of that every single year on an annual calendar year basis.
Do you have a follow-up, Representative Joni? Any other comments, Chairman Flintner?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Director Nesbitt, so speaking to easements, do you presently have some that are teed up with private landowners that you were just awaiting some potential money to go toward? And that's my first question. I'll let you answer that.
Madam Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, Madam Chairman. So we don't have any that are fully developed, fully vetted, sitting there waiting to go. And the reason for that is because the amount of resources the commission's had to allocate to those to this point has been really just access, yes. And then at times they have prioritized some other money out of the commission's just normal operating fund for these kind of projects. But there hasn't been an amount of resourcing that's got us to a point where we've gone out and sought these because we knew we couldn't pay for them. And so I do believe, though, that there are enough opportunities out there that within a fairly reasonable amount of time, if this was to pass, we could go out and find some, obviously the easier ones would come first, but there are opportunities all over this state to be able to apply this money.
Follow-up?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you, Director Nesbitt. And then my other question is the same question I asked Representative Western. Why not just create a mechanism to increase the conservation stamp and earmark it specifically for access, yes, and easements without the creation of all this new language?
Director Nesbitt?
Madam Vice Chair, Madam Chairman. So, the way I'm interpreting the language is that Representative Western's intent was to provide some pretty specific guidance to the commission on where they would allocate the funds. I mean, I certainly feel like the commission process and the commission's track record reflects that they could, more flexibility is probably better for the commission. And they have always demonstrated a desire to follow legislative intent. But the way I interpreted the reason that Representative Western put this language in was to be pretty darn specific and have the legislature tell the commission where they needed to spend the money.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair.
Representative Knapp?
Director King, I had a question following up to Representative Jennings. Is part of the reason you would go from year to year allocating funds without expending them in a given year, is part of that reason just the process itself? I know that with the easements that you have to go through public comment on with commissioners, and that's their process, having negotiations set up in advance sometimes can go from year to year and be a lengthy process. Is that correct?
Director Nesbitt?
Madam Vice Chair, Representative Knapp, that's exactly right.
Any other questions? Or did you have a follow-up? Any other questions? Okay, Representative Fortner, see that you joined it. Did you want to comment on this? Okay, thank you. I think that we will move next to Miss Rose online.
Madam Chairman, here she comes.
Can you hear me?
We can. Please
Okay.
state your name and if you're with an organization.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Liz Rose, and I represent Trout Unlimited in Wyoming. Trout Unlimited, as many of you know, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to restoring and protecting native and wild cold water fish. So in Wyoming, we focus on trout fisheries and on native cutthroat trout in particular, as well as fishing access. So Trout Unlimited has over 1,600 members and 10 staff members in Wyoming. And collectively, we volunteer over 11,000 hours each year, contributing to on-the-ground fisheries restoration and access projects. So funding for access and conservation work in Wyoming is really important to us. So I asked our volunteer chapter leaders and council members about this bill, and the majority would not be opposed to paying an additional $9 if that would result in improved access to those difficult to access or inaccessible public lands, as well as more conservation work. When I think about transportation related conservation projects like those mentioned in section H2, I think of fish passage. So I really appreciate Director Nesvik highlighting the importance of proper culverts that would facilitate fish passage. And I appreciate Director Nesvik also acknowledging that anglers will be paying for many of these conservation stamps as well. So I would support certainly an amendment, a minor amendment, if it's acceptable to all of you, that would simply clarify that wildlife conservation efforts related to the transportation system, as is mentioned in that section H2, would include culverts for fish passage. I appreciate your time and the opportunity to testify in front of you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. Any questions for Ms. Rose? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to public testimony. Ms. Johnson?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, again, Jesse Johnson with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I wanted to touch on a couple of numbers around this. We are very firmly in support of this bill. We listened to a lot of testimony earlier this morning on a different bill talking about hunting license allocation. And a lot of the issues that they touched on that was frustration with access as well. So while we have license allocation issues, we also have access issues. We ran a survey actually with our membership to ask about this specific thing. And we asked them if they were willing to support a $5 to $10 increase if that increase was directed directly towards access. The options that they had was yes, no, and need more information. We had 75% say they would support a $5 to $10 fee increase, and only 24% said need more information, and we had one stubborn person say no. But I would emphasize that we have 3,000 members in this state, and I'm from the western side. I'm very blessed with a lot of public access, but I have very adamantly used many of those hunter walk-in areas and hunter management areas. Nearly 2 years ago, I think it was the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership ran a study on landlocked public lands within the state of Wyoming, and they came up with a number of 3 million acres. So that's a significant amount where this money can be put to start solving these problems, but on a voluntary basis. And I want to emphasize looking at how successful Access Yes has been on the shoestring budget. Last year, fiscal year of 2019, if I'm correct in how I was reading the report, they took in $161,916 from sportsmen, but that's small potatoes in compared to what 1.6 million a year could do. And so when we're looking at solving this problem of access, remember, it's not just solving it for me, it's solving it for everyone, because if there's more access, there's less crowding on landscape, There's more safety in shooting situations. There's less harassed wildlife. It's really solving a lot of other issues that we hear complaints about from hunters as well, while also fairly compensating the landowner that voluntarily enters into this. I think that fair compensation is important because access is precious to us and we should be paying a fair price for it. I know that many of the WWF staff has used access areas and a lot of access, yes. And I would just say that we stand in very firm support of this bill.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Johnson? Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So thank you for coming today. Really appreciate that. So when you polled and those numbers had, were you aware of in the bill that 15% goes to do other aspects of that? Were they made aware that not all of it's going to be for access?
Ms. Johnson.
Madam Chair, Representative Jennings, I think we asked just a basic sort of blanket ask around the access. You know, the $9 increase, I think falls well within that. Maybe that $1 over of the 10 that they said can be allocated to the transportation issues. What I will say is that our membership is very aware of Wyoming Wildlife Federation's staunch support of wildlife crossings. We have been working on this from the beginning. We helped pass the license plate bill and we continue to work on it. And this committee has been incredible in support of that. So thank you for all of that work. But our membership does know that. I would hope that they maybe are okay with that 15% going to it, but I don't want to speak for them.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Johnson? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you
Commissioner
guys very
Livingston,
much.
are you interested in weighing in?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lee Livingston here representing Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association, mainly because we chose to monitor this bill. And just a point of note of why we chose to monitor it is while none of us personally have any problem with paying the conservation fee, our clients have paid the conservation fee. Excuse me. As commercial outfitters, we cannot use the walk-in areas. We can't use the access areas when you're operating commercially. Again, we don't have a problem with that. Our association is very supportive of any funding that goes towards transportation as far as crossings, anything to help with the migration corridors. We're very, very supportive of that. But as an association, we just chose to monitor this, just monitor this bill as for right now. And I'll stand for any questions.
Chairman Flintner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Commissioner Livingston, if you could put on your other hat.
We only switch badges?
Please, yeah, switch badges. Can you speak to us as a commissioner? And in Park County, have you dealt with this at all in any of these hearings or any? So if you've got anything to speak to this, from the other side of the room, that'd be great.
Commissioner Livingston.
Madam Vice Chair, Madam Chairman, in my 8 years as county commissioner in Park County, I have not been approached about any of this. I don't see that we'd have any problem in wanting to, be kept in the loop of any large access purchases. And as a commissioner from Park County, increased access to public land is something that myself and the rest of the board is very supportive of.
Any other questions for Commissioner Livingston? Thank you. Oh, wait, Representative Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Lee, would Outfitters Association be supportive of the proposal by the Trout Unlimited to help with the movement of trout, I guess, through these streams?
Commissioner Livingston.
Am I commissioner or my board?
Mr. Livingston.
Madam Chairman, Representative Winter, I can't speak for the association because this amendment just came forward. I can speak as citizen Livingston, outfitter Livingston. I would be supportive of it, but I cannot give a position for the association since I haven't been able to communicate with them.
Okay.
Follow up.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to address that question to Ms. Johnson as well. If her organization would be willing to support the Trout Unlimited. Okay.
Okay, we
thank
see
you.
it. We see a nod of the head.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else? Thank you very much. Any
Thank you.
other public testimony? Don't forget all your badges. Not, does it have a little green ring around the base of it?
There it is.
There you go.
Okay. Madam Chairman and committee members, I'm Steph Kessler with the Wyoming Outdoor Council. Our organization has raised money to donate to Access Yes. We think it's a great program and we support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Kessler? Thank you very much. Mr. Moline.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Committee. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. I'd like to start my comments by Representative Western has reached out to me several times about this issue, and I just want to go on record that I really appreciate him getting my input on this. This is a good thing to do. I realize these programs are optional to landowners. They're an opt-in. If the financial incentive is enough, the landowner will do it. If it's not enough, they won't do it. I would rather have the increase in fees an opt-in rather than compulsory. And, you know, not all sportsmen, not all people that get hunting and fishing licenses are going to want to pay it. I think the people that have the strong desire to improve access will be willing to opt in. There's one aspect, in my opinion, that's missing from this legislation, and that's a mechanism for improving the enforcement of the easement stipulations. I'll give an example of one of my Farm Bureau members. It's one of Representative Winter's constituents. On the property he owns is an easement for fishing and waterfowl hunting. In a span of about 60 days, when my member was at home at nights and on weekends, several violations. People coming out there in violation of what that perpetual easement was for. Little to no help from the managing agency to take care of those problems. To me, this is one of the problems. I hate to say, I don't want to use the word problems, shortcomings of this bill is a mechanism for the enforcement of the easement stipulations. In visiting with some of my members, these optional programs have worked very well. It's used how it's supposed to be. Others have not had near as good of experiences, and then they will opt out of it. That's the way these programs are supposed to work. You opt in. If it doesn't work, you can opt out. But again, I think, and I don't know, I hate to come to you with a discouragement without coming up with a solution, but somehow to increase the enforcement of the easement stipulations, I think that's imperative to keep these easements in a longer term, to have them renewed, to have them ongoing. And I don't know, I know the managing agency can't be everywhere at once. And quite often managing an easement stipulation, they have other issues such as poaching, trespassing, things like that, that take a higher priority. With that, Madam Chair, Committee, I would sit for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. So just to be clear, when you say opt in, opt out, The $9 increase is what you're talking about on opting in or opting out?
Mr. Moline.
Madam Chair, Representative Sweeney, yes, the easements, the access programs are already opt-in, opt-out. I would rather have the increased fee be much like, I believe there's at least two things, the Access Yes program, that's an opt-in. You can give more money. We used to have a Predator fund that people could opt in, opt out of, add money to it. And then because of my inability to find my way around, I always opt in on the search and rescue. So that, yes, I guess in a short answer, yes, it was on the fee. The programs are already opt in, opt out.
Do you have a follow-up? Any other questions? Thank you.
Madam Chairman, Committee, thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And again, I want to reiterate, I really appreciate Representative Western reaching out to me. Thank you.
All right. To the committee, I guess, if we're done with public comment, any other public comment? Representative Western.
Madam Vice Chair, maybe just to touch on some of the comments that were made by the agency. The shall is in there because to ensure that the statutory structures are in place, that money does get expended in a way that is beneficial to hunters. I think hunters are not interested in paying an extra $9 and have it sit in a fund for however long. I think at the end of the day, if they're paying that money, they want to make sure that they're getting a return on it and doing so shortly. So it was meant to have some kind of time, defined time frame to ensure that that money is getting expended for these access agreements rather than just having that money just sit in the bank. So thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Okay. Any other questions for Representative Western? Chairman Flintner.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And Representative Western, with regard to the request by Trout Unlimited to include fish corridors in Romanet 2, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm pulling up my statute here.
Representative Western.
Madam Vice Chair, Chairman Flipner. I mean, as an outdoorsman, I certainly love to fish too. And I think that certainly there's a lot of hunters that absolutely fish as well. So I would, if an amendment was brought by the committee, I would consider it to be friendly.
Any other questions?
Madam Chairman.
Oh, Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I'd like to go back to what Representative Western said there. I see a place where it says on the report that they shall do that subsequent during the preceding fiscal year. Could you point out where it is that there's to expend this money yearly, annually? You alluded to the fact that the payers would like to see this done in the year they pay this money out, or at least not much of a lag time. Is there a place in here that I'm missing that shows that addresses that they shall expend these new taxes within a certain length of time?
Representative Western.
Madam Vice Chair, yeah, page 2, line 12, shall be used.
Any other questions? Okay, I guess we will, what is your pleasure, committee? Moved by Sweeney. Do I have a second? Second by Banks. Then walk through it and we'll see if there are any amendments. So starting on page 1, anything on page 1? Moving on to page 2. Anything on page 2? Moving on to page 3. Anything on page 3? Representative Haroldson.
a couple ideas. Let's take and let's partner with these agencies that have moved forward and said they have some ideas. And under between transportation systems and including signage on 4, let's put fish culverts.
Okay.
Insert that in there.
All right. So page 3, line 4, after transportation system, before including add fish passage. Is that the
Fish
proper
passages,
term?
fish culverts.
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
What's the proper, I mean, we heard fish culverts. Fish passages, I mean, that might work as well. I don't think it really matters. What is your pleasure? I mean, we'll say fish passages.
Well, let's ask Director Nesbitt, Game and Fish, what would be the proper term, if you can bring him back?
And Madam Chairman, I believe he said he might have a conceptual amendment. Personally speaking, just from a linguistic standpoint, I think I'd rather have it mentioned. I mean, include wildlife corridors, wildlife crossings together, and then maybe perhaps put it in before the after wildlife crossings, you could put fish corridors or fish culverts and game fences, maybe.
Okay.
Director Nesbitt, have you been following our conversation?
Madam Vice Chair, yes, I have. And fish passage is a broader term.
Okay.
Sometimes it's not just, so I would recommend that the committee consider fish passage exactly in the spot that you just described on line 5 after crossings.
So after crossing, so on line 5 after crossings,
Okay.
to add fish passage?
So I'll restate the amendment. So page 3, line 5 after crossings, we will insert fish passages and game fences. So that's how it'll read out.
Madam Chairman, if I could just make a little amendment to the amendment, you would include also a comma after crossings. So
Okay,
just-
crossings, comma, fish passage.
Thank you.
And game fence.
And Madam Vice Chairman, is that passage or passages?
Is that passages, the Director Nesbitt?
I think fish passage, singular, not plural.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's been moved by Haroldson, seconded by Representative Winter. Any discussion on that? Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed, no. Motion carried. Okay, moving on down through page 3. Any other? Representative Haroldson.
I would like to take on line 18, where it is at $21. I would like to have a discussion in this realm about an amendment for bringing this to be, instead of it being a requirement, being a suggested donation of $9 in a checkmark box. So that way, whenever someone is purchasing a conservation stamp, it will be directly in front of them as a access yes suggested donation of $9 that they would have to uncheck when they purchase.
So it's an opt-out.
It would be
is
an
what you're
opt-out, not opt-in.
Okay. I have a question for Director Nesbitt. Is there already a checkbox for donation for access? Yes.
Madam Vice Chair, there is currently a checkbox similar to search and rescue where you can check the box and say, and then you can determine the amount that you want to donate to either search and rescue or to access yes.
Okay.
Director, Madam Chair,
Yes.
Director, would it be advantageous for having that in 2 places? Or would that be a redundancy that we should not have?
Madam Vice Chair, Representative Haroldson, I think it's a redundancy because the opportunity already exists in the current law.
Is that a opt-in or opt-out option?
It's an opt-in and then a specified amount that the customer determines.
Understand, thank you.
Any follow-up?
I
Representative
still
Harrelson?
believe that we need to have this as an opt-out option. And we don't have to even, we could just, I don't know. I believe that if we can give that the option, you guys need to understand, I'm going to put I guess a point of order here. I have a lifetime. This doesn't affect me in any way, shape or form. I just, at the same time, for a person who, I deal with enough people who are just, I mean, they just want to get some meat on the table and they don't want to put any more into this than absolutely possible. I think we need to also consider them and protect them. So I would like to see whatever the nomenclature is in there, basically have an opt-out option for a lower price conservation stamp would be my recommendation.
Is that an amendment?
That is an amendment. Now, how that exactly is written here, I'm not 100% sure, and that's what we'll have to figure out. 1 second.
You have a second.
Is there a second to that amendment? Jennings? So moved by Haroldson and seconded by Jennings to make this opt out so that you would have the $21 fee. And unless you mark the checkbox, you would pay that $21 fee. If you mark the checkbox, you would pay 12.
Correct. So if you don't uncheck something, you will pay 21. If you do uncheck, you will then pay 12. So if you would have to make a conscientious effort to lower the price instead of a conscientious effort to raise the price.
Okay. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So and I don't know if this goes to the director or not, but so would that opt out? We have in my part of the world, a lot of people that come up from the state south of us to go fishing on the Miracle Mile and spend a lot of money. And I don't want them to have the ability to opt out of that additional $9. They're spending enough money that coming into our state. So my question is, does this apply for everybody, even non-residents would be able to opt out of the additional $9?
Thank you. Director Nesbitt, I guess it is my understanding that there is not an in-state and out-of-state conservation stamp. It is just a single conservation stamp that has nothing to do with residency. Is that correct?
Madam Vice Chair, that is correct. It's just a stamp, and so everybody buys the same stamp.
Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And my question is to the bringer of the amendment. I'm not understanding your reasoning for opting out versus opting in. Do you feel like you would catch more people and get more dollars with an opt-out versus an opt-in?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I do.
Representative Haroldson. Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question and a comment probably on the amendment. My concern is that we're diluting the bill to the point of the original program itself. And there would be no reason for this. With an opt-in, at least you've got the ability to donate as well. With an opt-out, you get rid of that. So it may be a wash in the first place. So just a question back, if you think that might dilute the entire benefit of the bill.
Representative Haroldson.
And I do see where you're coming from on that. I struggle with a 75% increase on the conservation stamp, I guess, because that's a heck of a whack right out of the gate. Especially since the original intent of the conservation stamp was to be not a permanent installment. It was supposed to be temporary, and I think it was 1984 was a long time ago. So the temporary is getting pretty permanent. So, and now we're adding more to it. So I just think that was where I guess I'm going at is, but if we already have an access, yes, donation port, I mean, it is a redundancy. It is, I mean, I understand that. And so this is what I'm going to do, because I'm gonna withdraw that amendment. And I'm going to just leave it as it is, but with the reply that I think that a 75% increase on our conservation stamp is pretty excessive.
You'll withdraw your second. Okay. So that amendment's been withdrawn. So moving on, as we go through page 3, any other comments on page 3? Moving to page 4. Okay,
Madam Chairman.
yes,
Um,
Representative Sweeney.
Thank you. So I missed part of the conversation. I apologize for that, but so a lot of times in some of these accounts, it takes a little while to generate enough money, as we've heard from some of the testimony, if the prices, if the dollars are there to incentivize a landowner for the access. And so I question, why not give the discretion to the department to accumulate those dollars rather than the shall? And that's my only concern, because sometimes if you've got a very large landowner that controls a lot of land, a lot of mass, maybe 100,000 acres, with multiple access issues, that's going to be a different price point than somebody that's got 5,000 acres, in my opinion. So am I missing something there?
No, I don't think so, but I guess would that be an amendment to remove those shalls, or?
I really am not certain.
Chairman Flintner.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I think that could be rectified if you go back to page 2, line 12, and just remove the word annually. You're still requiring them to use 85% of the funds to go toward easements, but that wouldn't have to be expended annually. Then you would have, and I would think that language would then allow the department to be able to build a fund to go toward those easements, because I do know putting together those easements is not an easy task. But I would prefer to get Director Nesvic's comment on that, if just removing annually might help the situation.
Director Nesvic, a comment on that, and then comment on page 3, line 2. There's an annually there as well for the 15%. So if you'd comment on both of those.
Madam Vice Chair, Madam Chair, what you just proposed there would certainly eliminate the concerns that we have for the reasons that Representative Sweeney outlined. And I'm talking about in both places.
Thank you, Director. Representative Western, does that cause you angst?
Not if he's wanting some easements.
Madam Vice Chair. Again, my concern, as I said before, was I just would hate for that money to just go in account and sit there, but obviously this bill is in your hands and at your discretion. So of course I will gladly accept whatever outcome the committee feels is the best consensus moving forward. But I was not aware of the agency's concerns prior to this meeting, so.
Madam Chairman, I can, if I may.
Yeah.
Presently involved right now with an easement to get a water line across our property from one of our new dams that we've just installed in the state. And there's an issue. And what I was kind of surprised about was the fact that those easements were not teed up before they actually began so much more of the process. Because there is a lot involved with that, because that easement is binding. And if you're a landowner, it's in perpetuity. And so it's really critical that the language is right for the landowner and for all involved. And so I do agree with the director that it's not an easy overnight situation, that it would take a little more. And so I do think there would probably need more. I don't think they could expend those funds annually.
So is that a lot like an amendment?
Yes, ma'am, I would move that, yes. And are you, Barbara, are you clear on that? So it would be page 2, line 12. Remove the word annually. And then what was the other location?
Page 3, or page 3, line 2. There's a annually on the 15% as well. And I know those wildlife conservation projects can be expensive as well and may need to have funding over several years.
Okay, so you're my second?
I am your second.
All right.
Okay, moved and seconded, moved by Flintner, seconded by Newsom, that we remove annually page 2, line 12, and that we remove annually page 3, line 2. Representative Winter. Did you? Oh, okay.
I-
Representative Sweeney.
Before we vote, I just want to make the point that I don't think it does anything inherently wrong to what you're trying to propose here. You know, that by building up a little money, in my opinion, you might be able to get better access in parts of the world in Wyoming that we're after here. So I hopefully you'll feel at the end of the day that it's helped Bill. So.
Representative Jennings.
Madam Chairman, and not wanting to push back against Madam Chairman, Madam Chairman. So I'm gonna urge the committee to go no on this. And should this bill pass, we're going to raise a tax on these people that go out and put meat in their freezer. We're gonna go 75%. The people who see that $9 increase, should this become law, they're expending this with the idea in their mind that this is to give them access either this year or no later than something that has been worked on. They're not thinking about a slush fund that is in work for 3 years to get an access for a easement. And so I think, you know, if you were to do this, you would need to put some sort of parameters on there. I think Representative Western, the annually was okay. There might be other places where they just might not want to do that easement yet. Maybe next year they'll dedicate more money into that. But I think that the people that are paying this tax are expecting to have better places to hunt in a very near time frame. And I think the annual was a good parameter to that. Now, what the good chair lady is, the amendment. I'm having trouble with those, aren't I? The chair ladies and chairman. I understand the concept there, and I think that there might be something that needs to address there out beyond this. Although maybe the director has a mechanism to address. Surely this isn't the first time that they've run into an easement that's hard to negotiate. So what do they do currently? And so if we just take this out, and we take this parameter out, we're kind of leaving an open-ended, yeah, everybody pays $1.4 million more a year. Maybe we're going to pile up 5 million before we get to this. And so for that reason, I'm a no on the amendment. Thank you.
Any other comments? Representative.
Madam Vice Chair.
Yes, Director Nesvik.
Yeah, I did want to make one quick point here before we vote. So out of complete fairness to Representative Western, he did work very closely with the department on this, and I did not articulate to him this concern that you're all debating right now. And so certainly not his fault that he came today not prepared for this. That's on me, and that's not the way we typically do business. So I apologize to Representative Western, and if this does pass, I commit to working with him on trying to deal with his concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Knapp.
Madam Chair, I'm somewhat in favor of the amendment. I do respect the position of Representative Jennings, though, that the desire to not create slush funds. This one's a little bit different in the fact that it's committed to a specific goal. And I think that goal is both one of the public, one of the commissions, to get access. And so I don't anticipate that would build up as much as we would think. Maybe a compromise would be to cap it at a certain dollar amount as far as annually what's to be in that account. But as a former commissioner, as a former county commissioner, I agree that those access easements aren't a simple thing sometimes, and they are recorded. They're public access easements, and you're dealing both with the landowner and with landowners surrounding the area. So those sometimes are complicated and do take a while. So maybe a cap on the dollar figure may be a compromise rather than an open-ended year-to-year buildup.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I think these are all without doubt excellent concerns, and you're absolutely right. Some of these easements are complicated, they take a while. And so I think those portions should have enough time to negotiate them and make sure all the Ts are crossed and Is are dotted. The access yes agreements are just a simple contractual agreement between a given rancher or landowner and the Game and Fish, which can be on a little bit more of a condensed time frame. I think maybe to kind of alleviate some of my concerns and the committee's concerns, I'd be happy to work with the agency and the commissioner to maybe find that sweet spot of a defined time frame where they want to be able to compile a good roster of leads for access yes or easements, but also make sure that the hunting public is getting a return on this additional fee. So should the committee choose to advance this bill forward, amended, unamended, however you guys choose, I would be committed to working with the commissioner to find that good sweet spot for something like that.
Okay. Any other comments on the amendment to delete annually in 2 places?
Question.
Hearing the question being called, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has passed.
Question on
So back on the bill. Any other comments on the bill? Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I have several heartburns with this bill, in case the presenter couldn't tell that. I'm usually very pro-tax. But in this case, this is a 75% increase. And I think about the people in my district who are trying to put meat in the freezer. And maybe they're trying to teach their kids how to hunt at the same time, and they got 3 kids. And we're going to put this conservation tag for each one of those young adults let's say young adults that they're trying to help out. And I think now we're up to the price of a deer, of a doe deer, 50 pounds of meat in the freezer. And I think, I agree with the good bringer. Access is a very good thing. But when I look at those two, we're trying to gain access into 3 million acres in a state where we have literally millions and millions. I mean, we're not like the many of the other states, some of the Western ones we are. And so, and I get that we have a problem there. I'm not at all opposed to the notion of we need to solve that. Raising a tax 75% is not the answer to that. I think the idea of making it a voluntary and pushing that, I think we had testimony there today that are here today that said the compulsory is that's the problem. And that is the problem for me, is making it compulsory. I'm all for giving to those things, and I'm all for having better access. But I just think, boy, this is a bridge too far. So I'm going to urge the committee to vote no.
Any other comments? Representative Banks.
No surprise that I would be opposite to my good friend and neighbor here. But I just pulled up all the emails I've had on this bill, and every one of them and these are all constituents from Sweetwater County, so I don't know about the rest of the state, but all of the emails from the constituents I've had are 100% supportive of the bill and are not hesitant to pay the difference in wages. So I would be a yes vote and encourage you to vote yes on this one.
Any other comments? Okay. Representative Winter.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. My question is to Representative Jennings, if he has any, has a thought as to how to remedy that situation with this bill in order to, I think you said to make it voluntary. So is there a way that we could do that for residents versus non-residents? I don't think the non-resident will balk at it at all, but the resident is probably the problem. So if there's a way to address that for the resident, I would be certainly willing to think about it.
Representative Jennings.
Well, Madam Chairman, thank you. I think you could run into some problems there of picking classes one over the other. I think it's possible that it could be done somehow. I think our former chairman maybe has run into some of this sort of thing from time to time. It would be my guess. The thing about the voluntary that's important, and the good representative, my neighbor over there, is I look at this and I think, well, this is voluntary. So if all these people really want to do this, nothing has stopped them. But now we're going to make it compulsory. And so I get that there's lots of people that say that they would like to pay that extra money. Well, there's nothing that stopped them. Why didn't they do it? Well, they want to do it, pay $9 extra every time you go buy one. And so the compulsory is the problem. I think that could be perhaps an amendment, what Representative Winter's coming, but I think it'd be very difficult to bifurcate that.
Any other comments? Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always an interesting question to me when it comes between a tax and a fee. To me, a fee is still a choice. So if I hunt, and especially if it's for meat, then it's my choice to compare that price point of the fee to the activity and what I'll get in reward for that extra dollar amount. So if I get access to more areas to get meat, I'm appreciative of that and I will pay a fee to do that. No different than if I go to Wendy's and the cheeseburger is $8 and they decide to have a compulsory increase of $10. It is still my choice to go into that restaurant. It is still my choice to pay $10 for a burger. That's a fee. And so I have a problem with that tax and fee delineation. And so with the 75% yes, which is pretty rare on any issue, I would say that the people participating in the activity are ready to pay that fee to continue it. And so I'm in favor of the bill.
The question's been called. We'll have a roll call vote.
Representative Banks. Representative Haroldson.
No.
Representative Hunt. Representative Jennings. Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Madam Vice Chair, Chairman Newsom.
Aye.
Representative Sweeney.
Aye.
Representative Winter.
Aye.
Madam Chairman Fletner,
No.
6-3. The bill passes
As
with
amended.
amendments.
Thank you. I guess we will go back to the floor of the House. Thank you so much.